During President Trump's speech at CPAC this last weekend, there was one name that stood out that he kept referring to over and over again. And it wasn't Joe Biden. Well, he did refer to Joe Biden quite a bit in a negative way, but there was one guy he called out in a positive way, and that was our next guest, Gordon Chang. You can follow him on Twitter, Gordon G. Chang. And Gordon, I think that the president's praise from the stage there notes two things. Number one, you're a great analyst and a great observer of all things China. And number two, the problem of China is a big part of President Trump's agenda should he win the presidency.
Yeah, we were stunned and honored when he said that. And yeah, I think it's more China than Gordon Chang. Because China right now, especially this week, has been threatening war on the United States in very pointed language, something that we have not heard in decades.
Yeah.
And so right now, this is a moment of consequence for us.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Xi Jinping gave a speech where he actually very rarely does this. He actually called out the United States directly. And there's a lot of saber rattling right here. You don't often see a headline that says China warns the U.S. They might do it behind closed doors. They might do it diplomatically to the Secretary of State on a phone call, but not publicly like this. What is that all about?
Yeah, and Chang, the new foreign minister, did it on Tuesday as well. So this is a continuing theme. It's not just a one-off. I think what's happening here, Larry, is that China is trying to establish a justification for war. And we have heard this so many times in the past, going back decades. James Lilly, our great ambassador to Beijing at the end of the 1980s and the beginning of the 1990s, put it best when he said, the Chinese always telegraph their punches. Well, I think they're telegraphing punches right now, and we need to start preparing because there's nothing that we can do to stop them except to deter them.
So they're literally warning of conflict now, Gordon. What is it that's riling them up? What is it they want us to stop doing? Not that we should, not that we're going to, but what is it they're claiming is the problem here?
Well, there have been a number of restrictions that have been put in place by Presidents Trump and Biden. Biden's, I think, most significant policy on China was last August when, by executive order, he started banning the sale of advanced chips and chip-making equipment to China after a waiver period. But really, there's nothing we can do. And the reason is that the main motivating factor for Xi Jinping and Chang really is the weakness inside of the Chinese regime, which right now they've got some problems they cannot solve. And I think what they're thinking is that war for China would be really good right now for Communist Party rule.
What are those problems internally? Is this an economic issue, or are they having some sort of political struggle?
Both. But I think what's motivating it is the economy, which didn't grow 3.0% last year, as the officials reported, is more like a -3%. And the beginning of this year, the numbers that have come out are surprisingly weak. Everybody thought that they would be strong because of the end of the COVID lockdowns. But it's not just the economy. You got plunging property prices, debt defaults, worsening food shortages, deteriorating environment, and they still haven't gotten over COVID-19, although that is fading. And then, of course, the Chinese can see the demographic crisis coming where China will lose about 2/3 of its population this century. I think they're seeing a closing window of opportunity, Larry.
Well, and Gordon, there's certainly a historic precedent over the last 100 years of communist nations, when their economy starts to fail, as they always inevitably will, turning to war, turning to attempting to threaten or conquer their neighbors, or picking a fight just to sort of either distract from their economic woes and build support via nationalism, or in a very cynical way, those wars sometimes will boost the economy because you gotta spend money to build tanks. Is that what you suspect we're seeing here?
Absolutely. I mean, we were very fortunate that the Soviet Union went quietly, but that was because Gorbachev took a long view and understood what was occurring. Xi Jinping, when he first became General Secretary of the Communist Party, in other words, China's ruler, the month after this, he then gave a secret speech to Communist Party cadres about Gorbachev not being, quote unquote, a real man, and that Gorbachev was not willing to defend Marxism. As Xi Jinping said, China was going to go the opposite way, which means that because Xi, I think, perceives Chinese weakness, he's decided that he's not going to go out like Gorbachev. They're going to go out with war.
Can you help people understand this, Gordon? Because I think there's been this misconception for the last couple of decades that China's not really communist. They're not really true believers in Marxism. After all, they're doing business with Apple and with Walmart. What kind of communist would do business with Walmart and with America, for that matter?
That's a great question. Communists actually believe that they can allow capitalism in the early stages of socialism. It's called the primary stage of socialism in Marxist ideology. But Xi Jinping reveres Mao Zedong, the first leader of the People's Republic. He's been reversing the reforms that people are familiar with. And he's trying to build up the state institutions, state enterprises, state banks. He's turfing out even Chinese private entrepreneurs, and including, of course, foreign businesses. So this is a very different person with a very different view on the world.
This, by the way, all of this missile rattling, because sabers are quaint in this scenario. These are missiles we got to worry about. All the missile rattling here from China, warning us, telling us to stand down, threatening conflict. It comes at a time when a brand new Trafalgar poll says that the American people want the Biden administration to get tougher on China. So what's going to give?
I think Biden is going to have to get tougher on China. The consensus in Washington is that we've got to do something, but the real problem is urgency. There is not a sense of urgency in Washington right now. And you can see this with TikTok. The Warner legislation giving the Commerce Department the authority to ban TikTok.
Yeah.
Why don't we just ban TikTok? We have enough evidence of illegal and surreptitious surveilling and the use of TikTok for propaganda by China. We have the evidence. Let's just go out and do it.
What is the argument against banning TikTok? Is it some sort of freedom and libertarian suggestion that kids should have the right to poison their mind with this app? Because guess what? They don't, number one. And number two, it's not like we have other avenues to utilize social media, that we don't need TikTok. And number three, China has not made a secret about what TikTok really is. We know exactly what they're doing. The Constitution is not a suicide pact, Gordon.
I love that phrase from Justice Jackson, and that is absolutely right. We need to start defending ourselves. People talk about First Amendment. Well, no, the Beijing government, the Communist Party, has no First Amendment rights in the United States. And, TikTok says, well, we would never comply with Chinese demands to spy. Well, I'm sorry. In the Communist Party's top-down system, nobody can refuse a demand from the Communist Party. And they've even codified this in the 2017 National Intelligence Law, that they must spy if they receive a demand to do so.
And Gordon, last I checked, every time Google or Twitter or Facebook or any company, Disney even, wants to do business in China, they got to jump through all of Beijing's hoops. They got to comply with the authoritarian demands of the Communist Party in China. So how dare we actually suggest that maybe this TikTok thing isn't the best thing for our country?
Yeah, we have the evidence of the illegal taking of data from minors, from everybody else. As they say, there are 86 million spy balloons in the United States.
And in a kid's pocket, sadly. Meanwhile, things are about to get a little bit more tense as well, because the president of Taiwan is in Washington, D.C., and Speaker Kevin McCarthy is going to meet with him. That's not going to go over well in Beijing. But I got to ask, Gordon, shouldn't the president also meet, or at the very least, Secretary of State Blinken? I mean, we shouldn't be blinking here in this stare down with China. We should say, really, you're going to warn us? We're going to have a very high-profile dinner with the president of Taiwan.
Absolutely. I mean, there was the reporting from various sources that McCarthy was going to go to Taipei. And now the Financial Times is reporting that he will meet Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen in California. And that is meant to appease China. Well, if they're going to meet in the United States, as you point out, they should be meeting in Washington, D.C. And I absolutely agree that it should be Biden, as well as the Speaker of the House, who meets Tsai Ing-wen.
Yeah, so, imagine that, bipartisanship. And you're right, thank you for correcting me. The meeting will be in California, not in Washington, D.C. Gordon, we got to leave it there, sadly. But did you like what I did with the Blinken in the stare down Blinken?
Larry, you are so clever. I mean, that's why you are always the host at the Reagan dinner.
There you go. Can we keep that soundbite? Send that to Gorka. Keep that man in his place. Thank you, Gordon Chang. More to come on O'Connor Tonight. You're watching Salem News Channel.